Hey, what's up? If you watched the last video, you know what's coming. OBS didn't record any of the video for this video and the video after it. So I think this video is the one on optimization. So yeah, you're not going to get any video for this one. So if you would like to see what optimization would look like, if you need to see that visually, I have plenty of videos on the channel just about refactoring your code, optimizing your code, speeding it up. I even have a refactoring video just on optimization. So please go check that out. Maybe I'll go link it in the description. But other than that, you can just go listen to this one like a podcast and just hear me kind of give a bit of a spiel. It's a very short video anyway, so relative to the ones I already post up. So yeah, I think it's still a good kind of overview of how you might optimize your code in the context of doing a project with the idiot method. But yeah, I will catch you in the video. Bye. What's up? Welcome back to Deep Dive. So we are talking about the idiot method, and we just got through talking about the investigation part of the idiot method. So we are the design part of the idiot method. So we are ready to talk about the third phase, the most exciting phase, which is the implementation step of the idiot method. So implementation, I've said it before, it is the most fun part of the design or the coding process. You just get to kind of sit back with a nice cup of coffee, code out the entire solution. Now, this does not need me to go into any strong details about, because there are plenty of videos out there of people coding out solutions. And I'll honestly use this as a tie to make you come back to the channel, because I am going to have videos of me coding out projects in detail and kind of showing you all my tricks that I use when I'm coding out something and how I resolve on issues. So if you want to see examples of implementation, just come back to the channel. But just know that this is the stage where everybody starts their coding. So they just actually make the solution, whether or not it's a proof of concept, an integration of some new technology, some improvement to the technology, new features, all that stuff. That's what you're doing in the implementation phase. And like I say, while it might be the most fun part of the dev process, it's certainly one that you have to be due diligent before you get to it. So you want to make sure that you've done your proper due diligence with your investigation work, and that you've looked at all possible solutions, and you have a good understanding of the space that you're about to dive into. You've asked experts in this area questions to make sure that you're using the technology in the right way. And then you've brought all that insight to the design meeting to get buy-in from your team and make sure that everybody is on the same page on your decision. And then once you've gotten on the same page on something, you step into the implementation phase, where you should be able to step into a chamber and you can and just code out this thing without much more input from anyone else. Like if you're asking people for design input while you're going through the implementation phase, I would say stop immediately. Go back to that design phase and make sure that the questions that you're asking are getting valid answers, and don't change the entire design of your project. One of the most expensive errors to fix are design errors in your implementation. And so those are errors that get baked into your product because you had a faulty design. And these can be really expensive. I've seen projects that have been 2 years in the work, have to be completely regutted, rebuilt from the ground up after those 2 years, and the deadlines are still as pressing as they were before. So you want to be very careful. You always want to be very careful when you're going through the investigation design. You're going to make mistakes, of course. You can't think of every single thing, but you want to make sure that as you're going through the implementation phase, you're not just kind of putting a band-aid on every problem that you come across. Some of the problems that you come across really do require you to go back to the design stage and ask yourself, hey, with this new insight, would I have designed this thing differently? So that's something to keep in mind. And it's okay to go to the design stage even if you're a couple of months into the implementation process. It's okay to go back, look at your original design and say, hey, with this new insight, does this do any massive changes to my design? I might not be able to pick up that work immediately, but I can go ahead and communicate to people that, hey, I know we're 3 months in on this, but this decision here actually impacts a lot of other things for us in the future. I think that we need to kind of step back, and maybe we have to throw away all this work, but we need to make the decision to actually improve our design and go with a different direction. So like I say, an implement. Like I'll give you an example. So say that we get pretty far into implementing our solution with a NoSQL database, and we choose MongoDB. And then someone comes to us and says, hey, all right, cool. So you all did consider that we're going to have about 100 million active users on our website, once we've scaled fully out. And let's just say that was a guarantee that you were going to have. And then someone might be like, yeah, that's fine. Should be fine. But then you happen to run across an article on the internet that says, hey, MongoDB doesn't scale well past 1 million entries. I don't know exactly what the number is, but MongoDB doesn't scale past 1 million, let's just say. And it's like, it passed 1 million queries a month. Like, you should probably be using something like MySQL or something, or a SQL server and all. And so you see that and you go like, whoa, well, that actually is something we didn't consider in the design meeting. And I actually need to take that back to my team and get some input. It can be very, it can be very tempting to kind of walk away from the problem and just say, oof, I don't want to go back. I don't want to re-gut all my work. I don't want to start over. This is scary. Like, they're going to blame me. Please, please, please don't ever do that. Especially don't do it for me. Your management should be very understanding if you come across something like this, which is a very innocent problem, especially if you've gone through the design review and you've asked other people for input, and then no one brought this up in the meeting, and then you come across this, then that just means that was new information that we didn't have, and all we can do is plan around it. So don't be afraid to kind of bring that new insight that you discovered during your implementation phase, to bring that out to the team, and then you as a team can figure out how to proceed forward. Now, if you're by yourself, these can be the worst days, right? You've spent many, many hours, maybe weeks building out something, and then you find out something like that, and it's like, well, man, like, I've got to go build, my last 20 hours of work, I've got to throw that away and re-implement it. What I'll tell you is now start to ask yourself when that work would need to be done, right? With a well-designed system, you honestly should be able to replace modules easily. Like, I think about like how in the hi-fi community, they have these headphone adapters and speaker adapters that they're amps that allow you, that they're tube amps, and their tubes just kind of stick out of the thing. So I'll just like show you a hi-fi tube amp. So these little amps have the tube sticking out of them, and these are actually replaceable, and you can always upgrade these tubes over the lifetime of having the amp. And sometimes they blow out and you have to replace them anyway. And so that's what I say, your system should be exactly like this, right? There's some things that are coded, they're coded in steel. You're not going to be able to change stuff like that. But there's other things that, oh, okay, I can just pop this out. And so I would say, make sure you design your system where, at any moment you can swap out the entire database of the system. So this doesn't become a concern for you in the future. Yes, it might be additional work for you to have to do, but it's not a concern for you in terms of having to gut all your code and start over from the very beginning, because that's much more expensive, because that involves refactoring a bunch of your code. And it means throwing away code, like you don't even want to test with it. So it's much better to just make your code very modular so that you can pop in whatever database that you want. And, it doesn't have to be extremely modular. Like, in some languages like Flask, I know you could change the whole database type with just the string to one of the config values, but it doesn't have to be that modular. But, if it has something similar to that, where I can pass in like a database object and that, or database interface, and that database interface can be written to work with either MySQL or Postgres and all that stuff, then you're going to have a much more adaptable system. That's stuff that we will go into deeper details in the future when I actually talk about, when I go through my actual coding videos. But yeah, that's a great example of building very adaptable code. So if you follow a lot of the videos that I talk about on my channel, if you follow all those principles during your implementation phase, it can actually save you down the road some considerations that you didn't take into account for in your design phase. So just once again, things to think about. But yeah, I don't really want to go on too long about the implementation phase. I will kind of just note out, just don't go too long on this. And this is me maybe speaking to the new dev, or the dev unfamiliar with the technology. Don't spend too much time in this phase. Like, this is meant to be an extremely fast phase, and I think that people don't quite get told that at the very beginning. Your investigation and design phase should take the majority of the time on a project. And I think that people come into, especially when they're new to code, they tend to think that the implementation phase is the thing that's going to take a really, really long time. But if your implementation phase takes a long time, that means that you did not spend enough time investigating and designing. Your implementation phase should almost take like a day or two. And for a huge feature, that seems crazy, but you should have that much information about something that you're about to use before you come into the implementation phase. If you're going to go start watching NoSQL demos as part of your implementation work, you have failed to design a solid product. Now, that is going to stir people like crazy, because there are a lot of people in really, really nice companies, really well-renowned tech companies, that don't do that. There are a lot of people that try to figure it out on the spot. And certainly you're not going to know all the nuances of a library. So you're not going to know, like, for instance, if you decided that you're going to use an Azure VM, you're not going to necessarily know how to configure an SSL cert to take in HTTPS requests before you start the work. So obviously there's a little bit of research in doing that. But the reality also is that if you didn't know how to set up an Azure VM in the first place before you started your implementation work, that might show me that there's a little bit of non-due diligence, right? If you've told the team that Azure VMs are better than EC2s and you never created an EC2 or an Azure VM, then there's a little bit of due diligence that was not done in the design process, and you honestly should have been called out for it. But in many cases you won't be. It'll just be an oversight. People are busy and you'll get away with it. So but yeah, like I say, an implementation should honestly take no time at all. It should take a surprisingly little amount of time. But the reality is that most people end up spending weeks in the implementation phase because they don't go through the idiot method. Honestly, like they just jump right into the implementation phase and they design stuff on the fly, and they change their design constantly, and it's just nothing ever makes sense. And the reality is that is a great way to make really buggy, broken code that's going to be unmaintainable for the future and have to be constantly written over, and in the worst case be completely regutted. So but yeah, that's my rant on why it's important to spend some time in the investigation design phase before you go into the implementation. And honestly, even if you can't spend a full day or two just investigating and designing, it can be so useful to spend just the first hour before you go into implementation truly designing out what you're about to code out. And then once you've done that, like I say, I think if you're not going into flow mode when you're implementing something, if you don't know what flow is, go look it up. But if you're not flowing when you're going into your implementation phase, then it means that you're making too many decisions on that spot. And you're being a bit of a cowboy coder. Once again, go look that up if you don't know what that is. And yeah, you're not getting enough buy-in from your team like you should be. So, but yeah, that is the end of my thoughts on the implementation phase. I'll talk about briefly in the next video. I'll talk about kind of optimization and refactoring, but as with implementation, I have plenty of videos on these topics on my channel, so please go check that stuff out. Instead of trying to have me regurgitate all of that in one video. These videos are already so long, so yeah, I'm not gonna just repeat stuff that's on the channel. So, but yeah, I have plenty of stuff on implementation, and I will plan on doing some of honestly playthrough type videos of me coding out large solutions to stuff, so that you can kind of see what I mean when I'm like, hey, I don't really spend a lot of time thinking when I'm implementing in the implementation phase. I spend a good amount of time investigating and designing. I spend days investigating and designing, and I usually spend a day implementing something. And I'll implement really large features, but yeah, and that's not me bragging, but that's just saying that the time that a lot of people spend implementing, I split that up and put a lot of that on the investigating and designing. And I draw out diagrams, and I make sure that I really understand a system before I go into the implementation. And like I say, all the diagrams that I tend to use, I'll show those in future videos, and I might kind of do a follow-up video on ID in the future, but I kind of want to have you come back and watch some of those other videos that I'm going to push. So yep, that's it on implementation. I will see you back for optimization and refactoring later. Bye.